Welcome to Tech Captains. Today, Gareth and I are joined by two tech leaders, Nishadi Ranasinghe and James Sperring. Nishadi is a Chief Product Officer at ScrumBuddy, enhancing Scrum teams with AI-driven solutions, streamlining efficiency and effectiveness. And James, also at ScrumBuddy, which is our first in Tech Captains, is a CTO, and he applies his tech expertise in advancing the AI capabilities of the system and other various integrations that you will tell us more about in a few minutes. And so in this episode, they'll discuss the visions for the future of technology in business and how product and tech can work together. That's the thing that interests us most today. So James and Nishadi, hello.
Hi, thanks for having us on.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Thank you. So, I guess to start, James, can you tell us a bit more about ScrumBuddy?
So, ScrumBuddy actually is a kind of a brainchild of the company that me, Nish, and a few others have worked for a few years now. We've all kind of come from various backgrounds, some software, some engineering, but we've all generally experienced very similar issues with the ways that software gets delivered, that projects in general get delivered. And about a year ago, us as a management team, we were at an offsite and we were talking about what we can do, what other sort of projects we were interested in, what sort of things we could do to sort of diversify the company a little bit, really. So it sort of came out of a bit of just trying to find something to work on, a bit of something interesting, and also the conversation took us quite naturally, I think, to those problems that we've experienced. I think anyone who's worked on any project at any scale has experienced most of the issues that we talked about, and some of them, the more obvious ones that came to mind as initial problems to try to solve, were around the requirements of projects, defining what you're actually going to work on, not necessarily actually delivering on the requirements, but what are they? What is it that you're trying to deliver? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What is it? All of these questions that are very early stages in a project, and those are the early errors that often get made that then cascade throughout the rest of a project. So very quickly we were talking about AI, obviously, around, it was early 2023, so ChatGPT 3.5 had just come out and everyone was talking about that. So we started experimenting. We played around with some of the data that we already had with our existing project, and we started just asking it questions of, okay, is there anything missing from these requirements, or how long do you think this would take? Just various sort of scenarios that come up very, very often in the teams that we've worked in. And that's where it all started, really. That then we saw some really good results from those initial trials. We didn't do a lot of work in those early days, but on sort of refining it or anything, it was just very, very quickly obvious to us that actually this is working really well with the limited data and the limited trials that we're doing. And also, there doesn't seem to be anybody else looking at this. Everybody else is looking at how to deliver, how to write the code, how to actually finish off a project and do the coding, the technical aspects, not the soft skills side of things, not the thinking about the client, thinking about the background of the project and the context and everything else. So yeah, it very quickly to us became obvious that this is something that we can work on, that we can improve, and there wasn't anybody else really looking at it.
Thanks. And Nishadi, why did you decide to join? I mean, if I look correctly at the LinkedIn dates that are on both your profiles, you joined a bit after James. So can you tell us more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey to ScrumBuddy again came through the consulting route via Pina Vida. The dates you might have seen is just because I actually took a year off last year to have a little baby. So my official start date was January this year, I think, to come on board as Chief Product Officer. So my journey to kind of where we are today is very much through starting out in a very kind of mid-sized tech company at the start of my career. Very quickly starting to understand that really the key to requirements is understanding the business context, like James mentioned, the why behind why you're building something. And really speaking, because of the delivery team background which we all came from, and facing the issues with inaccurate estimations, unclear planning, project overruns, overspends, quickly helped me to get on board with ScrumBuddy, because it was such an obvious area that needed attention being given to it, and utilizing the idea of AI and really honing that to help delivery teams was something that was interesting as soon as it was pitched in terms of like the idea to the group. So it was very quickly something that I was passionate about, because we've all experienced the issues of that in our day-to-day.
I see. And now I have some questions for both of you. Like my first one would be around the collaborative dynamics. How do you collaborate together on a day-to-day basis to align the technology capabilities that are possible or that you want to achieve, James, with the product goals, Nishadi, that you find out from your research?
I think quite quickly, as between product and tech, what we've formed is almost like an alliance. Across delivery teams that I've worked in the past, there's often a misalignment, or this idea that the product people don't really understand tech and the tech people don't really understand product, or there's always some friction there. I think what we've done and tried to foster over the course of a number of years of working together has been an understanding that I, as a product person, don't always understand the technology of what it takes to execute something, that a requirement that I'm bringing to the table. And James will always sit down and talk through that with me. So, for example, if I've gone out and found out a particular requirement that I think is going to revolutionize the product, I'll always sit down and first have a conversation with James before I actually then sit down and map that out in terms of how it's going to look in the product itself. So it's fostering that collaborative environment, really. And we will permeate that throughout the teams as well, the delivery teams that we work with, always fostering collaboration. It is more imperative, as James said, we are a remote team. So that idea of talking and collaborating is something that we have to really pioneer. But across CPO and CTO, it's really important, I think, to really have those conversations up front, and having that respect that, you know, it's not that we're both working towards the same goal. Ultimately, we want to make the best product for people to use, and to have the most productivity gains across the industry. So ultimately, it's not going to work if I come up with something that he can't build, or he comes up with something that I can't implement to a customer. So that's really the way that we try and muddle through things together, really.
I mean, we're a fully remote team, so we have been fully remote from day one as an organisation, as Pina Vida, and we've taken that forwards all the way through. We've got a lot of remote tools. We're always on Teams. We've got a few regular catch-up sessions that every day we have daily stand-ups, you know, as a management team, as well as within the project teams. And I think the way that we work is just a lot of conversations, a lot of talking. From we make sure that any time there is any ambiguity, anything that we're not sure that somebody else wants from us, we're very quick to hit the dial button in Teams and actually have that conversation. But also just high bandwidth conversations in Teams itself, just having lots of conversations there. From a tooling perspective for the product, we've also got, you know, we use Azure DevOps for sort of the general backlog management, and there's nothing out of the ordinary really in that aspect of the way that we work. I think the best thing about this team, though, Sorry, go on. I was going to say the best thing about the team that we've got here as a leadership team that I've seen that seems to me different to a number of places that I've worked in the past is just that willingness to have these conversations, and we're all very quick to make sure that anything that we're not sure of gets discussed, and we're all open with that.
I was going to ask a very similar question to Ron around how you kind of align your technology and your product strategy. So I've been in organizations, I've worked with CPOs, I have a product team now. And to me, it's almost the pairing that will define the success of the business. Because if you think about it, in some companies, they have the CPTO role, right, where they sort of roll this all up into one person who tries to do both things, oftentimes at smaller companies. But I think it is so important for the success of the business. And I think what you're saying, Nishadi, is right? You need to have this very, very close relationship where you're understanding if James has an idea, can you actually turn that into a product? And if you have a product idea, can you build that technically in the platform that you have? I think the thing that sometimes people struggle with, and I'd be interested to hear James' answer to this, is where you have purely technical things, scaling issues, tech debt, those things that kind of fall outside of the product remit. How do you sort of bring those into your planning and your strategy?
Yes, I mean, it's a good question. I think your point about a lot of companies do this sort of CPTO hybrid role, and I think one of the things that's really good about having that as two separate people is that it allows one person to focus more on those technological issues, those purely technical issues of scaling, of whatever else needs to be dealt with from just a technology point of view, and then somebody else to really think about actually what the customer is going to care about, what the product needs, what's going to really move the needle as far as engagement, as far as usage of the product and of the features that are there. I think if you have one person who's very technical also trying to do the product, it's very easy. I mean, it would be very easy for me to fall into that trap of thinking, oh, this is a great idea and it seems like fun to implement, and I'm going to go off and do that. And then, yeah, I mean, it might be something that some users might find useful, but it's not something that has had someone with that customer focus, or even speaking to customers, speaking directly to potential users of the product. It doesn't have their input directly. And I think trying to merge that into just one person, I think is, unless it is a very sort of confined product, a very focused product, I think it's very easy to fall into that trap of veering one way or the other with just a single person. I think me and Nish, we have some good conversations around the ideas that I think would be useful, the things that would be good from a technical point of view. And Nish will say, but why? Or who's actually going to care about that? And it just having an outside voice and a second person to challenge those points of view. And equally from my point of view, like Nish says, if she's got a great idea but it's 6 months worth of work, maybe we don't do that now, but maybe we do because it's that valuable. But it's being able to have those conversations, I think, are a big benefit of having that as two separate roles. But obviously you do need to work on that relationship between the two people.
So I was just wondering, how often do you talk to your customers, and how often do you bring ideas to your customers?
So I try and talk to customers every week, if not multiple times a week. The start of my week is often reaching out to people, either within my network or people who I know who have signed up to the product, who are potential future users of the product, or who can help, who have signed on to help build the product itself. We run workshops to go through ideas that the team have either generated internally or something we've come up with in the management team. And that, I think, it's really important. Something that I learned very early on in my career is, first of all, I quite like speaking to customers and understanding that development really isn't something that you can, a technical product really isn't something that you can build without having a user at the end of it. And a lot of my career has been focused around change and transformation in terms of delivery, and actually sitting there and saying, look, this is a great thing that we're building, but who is it going to benefit, and how are they going to use it? So yeah, I do. That's one of the main parts of my job, is to speak to customers and make sure that what we're trying to deliver will deliver value to them.
What technology and product development you think will significantly impact your industry in the next few years? I don't know, like, if you have like an idea, either of you, of what it could be.
The obvious one, AI. I think the technology behind AI, the LLMs, obviously is something everyone is aware of the impact that's going to have. We could sit here and probably talk for days about the impact that's going to have. I don't necessarily think that the biggest shift to our industry over the next X number of years is going to be technological necessarily. I think the work that we've been doing on ScrumBuddy, and also just our backgrounds that we've discussed over the last couple of years of working together, I think it's the biggest issues that we face as an industry are interpersonal, soft skill type relationship issues, where projects don't necessarily usually fail because of technology. They fail because of bad management, bad planning, bad specifications, bad all of these other issues that come around it. And I think there are issues with the agile methodologies. There are issues with the Scrum as a framework, even scaling agile frameworks, and there are issues with all of them. And I think that over the next couple of years, I probably would see more improvements coming to the non-technical aspects of the way that we work in our industry through AI, rather than AI being a technical driver of improvements. I'll try and phrase that slightly differently, in that I think that what we'll see is that these AI toolings, whether it be LLMs or something else, will assist people to work better together. And I think that's probably going to drive a bigger improvement in results and output than just having AIs writing code for people or anything in that respect.
Also, to add to that, I think that the way that people are working now post-COVID, with more remote working, more onus for people to actually have really enforced, is probably the wrong word, but really deliberate conversations, means that technical people really need to enhance, I suppose, their kind of, I'm trying to phrase this correctly, try enhance their way of working with people who aren't so technical. I think that's one of the strengths of our relationship and across teams throughout my career. Often you'll have the technical sort of role really does attract more introverted people, and if people can start opening that up, it means that it will foster more collaboration across people like myself who aren't necessarily technical. And that opens conversations about how to actually build products better and for the people who need it. The other thing is I think that with the evolution of AI, it's important to, right now everyone's just jumping on it and saying, right, let's work out how we can use it. But people really need to assess how ready they are to implement those into their businesses. And that's something that I've been really kind of key on focusing on over the last few months, is really to understand who the AI champions are within a company, what the appetite for actually bringing that in is, the security concerns people have, the real kind of scaling up of these solutions. It's all very well having ChatGPT up on your screen whilst you're trying to write requirements or doing a presentation or doing whatever you're doing, but it's about then scaling that across your team, and how ready are customers to do that. It's something that we're constantly polling our customers on. So I think that's another thing that we need to sort of really think about over the next 1 year to 18 months.
And Don't you think that a lot of these Scrum and Agile methodologies, they often make the process less agile because it's adding a lot of steps and rules and deadlines and and people are, oh no, that has to be discussed in this meeting, this has to be with this, it has to be moved to that column, and you're losing the original idea.
Yeah, as I kind of said earlier, I think that there are a lot of issues with Agile and with Scrum and all of these frameworks. And I think a lot of the issues come out of the fact that people view them as frameworks. People view them as, this is the process that you need to adopt within your organization if you want to be successful. But every team is different. Every team, there's different personalities, there's different preferences of how to communicate with people. We follow some variant of Scrum, and there are people who say if you say Scrum but then you're not doing Scrum, which is fine. You know, we're not really doing Scrum, we're doing some variation of Scrum. But Scrum, I mean, Agile as a foundation to all of this is a philosophy, not a framework, right? It's a mindset to how to deliver something. It's a view of making sure that every individual within your team has what they need to be able to deliver. It's making sure that you're adaptable to changes, making sure you're not focused on just making sure that people are working, but that they're actually delivering something of value at the end of it. And then various frameworks got built off of those slightly incorrect views on that philosophy, and then you end up with some very big frameworks where people very often get quite dogmatic in some of those processes. I think one of the things that we know, certainly within Pina Vida as an organization, and something we're feeding into ScrumBuddy is this idea actually what we want to deliver is not just a Scrum buddy. You know, it's not just someone who is going to tell you how to do Scrum. It's someone who is an assistant that is teaching you how to deliver or assisting you to improve whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, you know, things like daily stand-ups or 3 Amigos sessions or refinements and estimations. Those are activities that are generally useful in some way or another, but they don't always have to be done in the same way. They don't have to involve the same people. They don't have to have the same timings. And a lot of this can come from, you know, if you get a good Scrum Master involved in a project, then they can see that actually maybe we don't need a meeting here. Maybe we can just turn this into something that's a little bit more long-lived with email threads or wikis or something else, and actually give people more time, give people different focuses of kind of building those relationships within the team to then be able to deliver more effectively together. Agile and Scrum, I think, are good frameworks for people to look at, but they shouldn't be looking at it as a framework. It should be looked at as a driver for change and as a driver for building that culture that ultimately ends up delivering more value quicker for the users.
So yeah, I just wanted to ask then, James, maybe talk about your tech stack a little bit. So I'm kind of interested as well. So we're doing a lot of LLM work where at my company, we're building multiple product features. I think, it was interesting, ChatGPT stormed the world for most people just over a year ago, but getting features into production is it's not as easy as people think, right? Some of the tooling is very early. So I'm curious to know what you're actually running on and how you've kind of built this. I think that would be interesting if you could explain some of that.
Yeah. So we have a few sort of stages that we're looking at with our tech stack. We've got an MVP. We've got certain features that are in flight, in use to varying degrees, and the early tech stack that we've got at the moment is in the interest of moving fast, using OpenAI APIs. It's using the various assistance kind of capabilities within that ecosystem, but it's built in a way that allows us to eventually move away from that. We've got some aspects in .NET with C#, ASP.NET front ends. We've got web APIs in the back end. We've also got some bits and pieces using React with TypeScript. But the sort of meat of what we're doing at the moment from an LLM perspective, from an intelligence perspective, is feeding that data in a slightly more intelligent way than maybe you would sort of default to. I think a lot of people would or our initial approach was just take the story details, take the information from Azure DevOps, feed that into ChatGPT, and then ask it questions. We've done some work to optimize the structure of that data and try to pull out more metadata from that and feed that into the interaction with the OpenAI APIs for now. But the main driver really of any of the decisions that we make is to not force us to be reliant on OpenAI in the future. I firmly believe that OpenAI will likely be the market leader for a very long time, or at least for the foreseeable. So I don't see this as, okay, someone else is going to come along and eat OpenAI's lunch and we're going to have to move to something else. But what I do want us to do is to have the option of running our own LLMs in our own data centers for mainly thinking about those kind of privacy-focused enterprises, because not everybody is going to be happy feeding all of their data to OpenAI, or at least not forever. So yeah, being able to move us off to have our own LLMs running. The longer term view is that we start thinking about actually training our own models. I think the kind of three key stages that I'm looking at really are: first stage, OpenAI; second stage, some open source LLMs that we can adjust, we can run locally to solve that privacy issue; and then later stages would be more training our own models, looking at more fine-tuned models that fit more of the development requirements aspect.
Okay, so I take it you're not doing anything like RAG or anything like that. And are you using LangChain? Is that how you're going to try and abstract yourself away from OpenAI?
It's mostly custom stuff at the moment. So we've looked at LangChain as an option for some future bits and pieces. There's a lot of different libraries out there that we've dipped our toes into just to sort of see what's there. But we're not really at the stage of having picked one that we're gonna use for now. I think the key thing, we are using sort of RAG. So we've got, all the data comes from Azure DevOps. At the moment, we're looking at Jira integrations and other project management systems as well.
Seeing all these AI thing, like you need to start your MVP with the existing APIs, and progressively as you acquire users, etc., you start building your own and becoming more specialized. We also have in this podcast, as you know, a small tradition that the guests introduce a book. So I don't know, Nishadi, if you could introduce yours. It's Jonathan Livingstone Seagull from Richard Bach.
Yeah, I was telling James yesterday that I was gonna mention this book today. So, and he was like, "Is it a tech book or a leadership book?" And I was like, "Well, it could be taken as all of these things." So basically, I came across it at a kind of book club, which was kind of focused on, I suppose, just life enhancing stories. But as I've read this book, so the book is about a seagull who doesn't want to follow the mold, and he wants to, instead of always just stealing food from people, he actually wants to learn the art of flying and do acrobatics. So the whole book is about how he goes against the grain, and he then sort of goes back to his family. His family then reject him, saying, "Look, you're not a seagull. You're trying to do all these different things, whilst we're all on the ground trying to feed off of other people's food. You're up in the sky, like doing all these acrobatics." So he goes and finds other seagulls. He leaves his colony and he goes and finds other seagulls who want to do the same thing as he does. And I think that really kind of resonated with me. The book obviously goes on different tangents. It'll talk a little bit about spirituality, but ultimately for me, what it kind of boils down to is this idea of non-conformism and really following your own path and taking steps in your own journey. And I think from my perspective, where I've come from product, and also I take a lot of inspiration from other really leading product people. So I read Steve Jobs's autobiography really early on in my career, and this idea of him just taking an idea and running with it and not really caring whether people were on board with him at the start, and really just being passionate about something and finishing off an idea and believing in something, and believing that you're doing the right thing, and then finding people who will jump on your bandwagon is something that I really take to heart. I've never personally been a particular conformist. I haven't done things in a particular traditional way, and I think it's important, specifically maybe in my role. I think as a tech leader, but also as a product person, I know that there's conversations that I've had in my team where I'm like, I really think this will work, guys. And then it's a case of, right, go and find me the people who will use what you're talking about. And it's really selling people on your idea and your passion for it, and understanding that it's not necessarily all about what's the correct thing to do for the most people. It's finding those points of magic.
Interesting, rather than being pure technical and exactly in the topic, like to take a bit of like distance from the problem. And I think, James, in the book you want to recommend today, Managing Humans, from Michael Lopp. So it's a book like that says more biting and humorous tales of a software engineering manager. You're also taking a step back because you're leaving the code and your IDE and actually realize there's people around you, or at least on teams.
Yeah. I mean, when you asked for a book recommendation, there were a few that sort of came up in my mind, of things like the classics, I guess, in the tech world, of Pragmatic Programmer and Mythical Man Month and various other bits and pieces. One that came to mind quite strongly was the Phoenix Project, which I will recommend separately. It's always a good one. But yeah, Managing Humans, Michael Lopp. If anybody has heard of Michael Lopp, he blogs a lot, I think under the name Rands. And I've sort of been reading his articles for years, and they've always been interesting and entertaining. And I've been meaning to buy his book for ages, and I finally got it for myself for Christmas last year, and sort of been making my way through it. And it is just an interesting viewpoint of how to manage people. In the spirit of non-conformism, I've growing up, I always knew that I wanted to work in technology with computers from very young, but all the way through kind of educational periods, so through to college, I never really took the technology track of courses to take. I did psychology, critical thinking, and various other bits and pieces, and it's always been something that I guess I've realized very early on that, or for me at least, technology is actually quite easy, but people are really hard. Trying to understand people is far more difficult than understanding the technology. So yeah, there's a lot of elements of Managing Humans, the book, and the activity that I think are genuinely interesting and worth anybody's time in reading. It's not a very long book. You could probably read it in a couple of days. But each chapter in it is packed full of not just entertaining information, but also some practical bits for everybody to take on board as well.
Yeah, I had one more question for you, and this is probably going to be a longer podcast than our previous, but it's fine because there's two of you, so I think we should expect that. So I had one more question for each of you. So I guess, Nishadi, I'll ask you one more. So I looked at your LinkedIn. You've had quite a varied career. I think at one point you were a COO. So I was wondering, what experience what experience have you had in the past, do you think, has been most influential in shaping you as a product leader today?
That's a good question. So I think my experience as a COO helped me understand that I didn't want to be a COO. That's one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is for me, I've worked as a technology head over in a small consulting firm, and I think that really helped me to understand the relationship really, and I think this has been a theme throughout this podcast across James and myself as well, where we really marry up sort of people to product and tech and all these sorts of things. And it's this idea of understanding that I think that role where I was the head of technology for a consultancy firm in a different country in Singapore, that helped me understand really how people can work together, or how you need to get people to work together to really deliver what you need from them. So it actually catapulted me more into the more managerial realms. Previously, I was much more in the delivery roles. I was much more sort of working on doing the do, whereas being pushed into that more strategic thinking, people management element really helped me to understand my capabilities and what my deficiencies were in that. And it led on to a lot of sort of internal or introspection, but also training really to understand how to manage people and influence people really. And I think that that's really helped with how I've taken the product role on here, because that's helped me understand relationship building first, then selling ideas, influencing your own ideas, talking internally across groups, but also externally. I think that was probably my most influential role.
And then James, I guess last question to you. So there was an interesting thing on your LinkedIn where you had posted a comment by someone who used to be a Google engineer, and they said something like, the mistake when trying to learn complex things like programming is thinking you have to learn it all. And then he went on to how there's something around a minimum effective dose. And you said, imagine this approach in any other industry with some examples. And finally, you said anyone could code. Not everyone should do it professionally, which I completely agree with. But do you think that it's time really now in software development for us to have a rigorous professional standards body, like a chartered engineer? Do you think that would solve the problem, or what do you think the solution is?
It's a very good question. I mean, first off, I didn't realize he was an ex-Google engineer. I just like to challenge people. There's
nothing wrong with that. That's good.
I think that what I took initial issue with that thread wasn't really the point that was being made, which I think that there's a lot of interesting ways to go from the education, the regulation, whether we need any of it. Somebody in my comments, I think, on that post quite rightly called me out a little bit for gatekeeping. And I absolutely see that point. And I think that what I wouldn't want to see is people prevented from getting into this industry. It's an incredibly interesting, challenging, exciting industry to be in, especially early 2000s when I got into it, and also now with the sort of AI boom and everything coming with it. So I think trying to put anything in place that prevents people from taking it up as a profession, I don't think that's what we need. But I'm entirely self-taught. I've got zero qualifications to be here speaking today. I've got nothing formal to hold behind me to sort of say that, to give evidence that I know what I'm talking about here, other than 20 years of experience effectively sort of doing the job. So it's difficult for me to sit and say we need everyone to be formally educated before they can get into it, because I don't think that is the right answer. What I do think we need is more people advocating for more of a depth of knowledge for more people. We see an awful lot, or I see an awful lot of people making it to levels of seniority where and this is no fault of their own, right? What they're doing is that they are doing exactly as what's in that post, which is they learn enough to be able to get by, to be able to make the next step. The issue comes when they get beyond that point of beyond that comfort zone too far, where they can't learn the next thing, or the next thing requires a big step back and they don't have the time to understand all of that foundation. So yeah, I can't give you any answers, but what I can say is that I think that people should encourage more people to learn things more deeply, because that gives you that foundation to be able to jump off and to look at new technologies with an understanding of where it's come from, and not just sort of jump into a big great void and have nothing underneath you to support you along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good answer. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule that suddenly you should have chartered engineers, and so no, I would agree.
I mean, Nishadi and James, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks both.
And to anybody still here listening, we will be back in 2 weeks. Bye bye.